Hi everyone, it's great to be a part of this day and I consider it a privilege to talk to you. My presentation is a better choice than free will, slightly different than whether it exists or not. This talk is heavily inspired by the work of Daniel Dennett and Tom Clark. So with free will, we have this free will problem. It's been debated for thousands of years. The gist is, how free are we in the choices that we make, and can we do otherwise? It's connected to many other complicated topics: evolution, consciousness, identity, the self, agency, morality, and people far more knowledgeable than I have written 500-page books about these things. I can't possibly condense all that content into this talk, although I'd love to try. So you can ask, what can be said in 12 minutes? Well, I'm going to try to give some basic arguments and perhaps some assertions. Assertions maybe because they aren't developed enough in the length I have to show them to you to be good arguments, but trust me, the depth is available elsewhere. Am I arguing for redefinition? That's the fancy way of saying, well, wait, you're saying that means X when really it means Y. And yes, I am going to do a bit of that. And that's partly what the discussion is. What should we call things? What are the terms we should use? I think we have to try to find the best phrase that describes the world we're in, but you also have to meet people where they are. I can't create an entirely new word and say we should all use this. And you're like, well, I've never heard of that. Doesn't make sense to me. So that's a bit of it. I'm being open about that. Outline. Part 1. Replace the term free will. Simple as that. And then part 2 will be a bit about determinism and why it's probably not as bad as you think it is. You're probably going to have to put on your philosophy hat now because there is some deeper conceptual stuff coming your way, but hopefully we can all get through it together. Part 1, replacing free will, in quotes, because that's the term free will. First we have to talk about what it means. Like any good discussion of philosophy, and even science or anything at all, what do the words we use mean? So what does the free part of free will mean? Well, are you talking about freedom from some sort of physical constraint, even social pressures, perhaps some sort of psychological addiction that you're in, and who doesn't want a free t-shirt? As you can see, these are all very important issues, including the t-shirt, but it's not exactly clear what is meant. And if it's clear to you, it's not necessarily clear to everyone else in this room, because they may feel just as strongly about a different term. What about will? Well, for will, there's desire. You can desire an object. It may be that you want something. You want an event to occur. But of course, complexity abounds because maybe you want to desire an event to occur. Or perhaps you don't want the desire you currently have. In a lot of the research on this topic content, they use the word volition, which is either the act or the process of making a choice, but then sometimes it's the capability to make a choice, and those are two very different things. Again, these are all important, but it's not exactly clear what it is. And if you combine them, what does free will mean? Well, now you have, well, maybe you want to be free from physical constraint, or then you desire not to have certain psychological addictions that you have, and maybe the capability to make a choice is going to influence your desire to be free from political oppression. And of course, again, who doesn't want lunch? Despite what the economists tell you about a free lunch. So that's the issue. I think this is too complicated. All of these issues are very important, but it's not clear what is meant. What should will mean? I'm taking the second part first. I think we should collapse it all and just use the word choice. And choice I've tried to simply define as selection from a set of apparent possibilities. We all make choices all the time. You chose to come here as opposed to doing something else. Nothing, don't have to read into it, that's it. People make choices, choices are made. Now you could have a longer discussion about what can make a choice. People can make choices. Can non-human primates make choices? What about dolphins? Do bacteria make choices? But we'll put that aside for now. Well, we got rid of will, so that's good. Free choice, that already sounds more appealing to me. I sort of know what choice is at least now. But the free, we still have all those problems here. So what can we do about that? Well, I think what we're really talking about in this discussion is a freedom from cause and effect. Freedom from time and space. It sounds peculiar, but that's sort of, I think, what the core issue when I talk about the free will problem is. It has to do with causality. And so I think we should use the term counter-causal instead of free. I have a little dash here, you're opposing causality, and another word is counter. Tom Clark used the word contra. I think counter is just a little more accessible. You know, you're in a diner, you're at the counter. Obviously, it's not that kind, but counter-causal, so going against causality. And then you put it together, you get counter-causal choice. It is the selection from a set of apparent possibilities independent of causality, or more simply, an uncaused choice. Why should we use this? Well, there are no confused associations like free will. Many people think they know what free will means, and for them it's true. This doesn't have that baggage. Counter-causal choice also forces a necessary discussion. This discussion is going to happen anyway. The first question is usually, do you believe in free will? And the second one is, what do you mean? And if it's not, it should be. Because then you're like, yes, I do. And the person's like, me too. And you didn't agree, but you think you did, and now you're confused. So free will has that familiarity to it. It seems transparent. I know free, I know will, I've heard this term. I don't maybe thinking about it a lot, but I know what it is. I think it's ambiguity masquerading as transparency. So that's why I'm pushing for this term instead. But of course, let's not bury the lead. So can you make counter-causal choices? Well, no. You make choices, but they are not in opposition to the cause and effect nature of the universe. I think this would be conceptually incoherent. I don't really know what it would mean. You have to transcend space and time, and that sounds very interesting, but it doesn't seem to be possible. I think you would require a supernatural intervention, but there's currently no evidence of that occurring, so no luck on that front. Don't forget, though, you still make choices. And even though you are being caused to make these choices, you are part of the causal process. So prior events, the totality of the universe, or more locally, your past, your genetics, your environment, how you're raised, your peer group, the school you went to, everything else, all the circumstances around it is causing you to have the behaviors you have and make the choices you make. But that in turn causes other things. You are just as real and you cause things to happen. Part 2. Determinism. Not so bad. We'll see, maybe. So, what does determinism mean? I'll give you 3 definitions. One is an academic, a singular academic. At any instant, there is exactly one physically possible future. All right? That's it. No options, no many worlds theory, or at least, even if there is a many worlds interpretation of quantum theory, there's still going to be one for one of you. And the more broader academics from the Stanford Encyclopedia is every event is necessitated by antecedent events and conditions together with the laws of nature. Sounds more like a philosophy description. Got that necessitated in there. Antecedent is just that which came before. They're all functionally equivalent. And then the People's Choice, Wikipedia, for everything that happens, there are conditions such that giving them, nothing else could happen. I'm basically saying the same thing 3 times just to approach from different angles. So that's determinism. A lot of people, they don't really like determinism. They feel, whoa, wait, you're locking me down to one option, one future. That doesn't sound good at all. Well, maybe not. So I'm going to try to give you 6 comforting assertions. There's a question mark because you might find them comforting, but I do. So number 1, if determinism is true, then it's always been true. This talk is not going to make it true. I'm not saying I'm going to say determinism is true, but one way or another we know it's true. And further, actually, it's true whether you want it to be or not. And number 2, people often link determinism and fatalism. It is technically not the same. Fate is, there's sort of one path that can happen, but there's usually an overarching will by a god or a spirit that is causing this destiny to occur. And actually, it doesn't say that destiny has to occur in a determined fashion. There could be magic. There could be that violation of time and space. Fatalism can work any way you want it to. So determinism is not the same as fatalism. 3, not all determinism is bad. You want there to be determined cause and effect relationships to things. When you apply pressure to a brake pad, you want your car to slow down. You don't want, well, maybe it won't this time. If you ingest calories, you want that to give you life energy to live. And you want the light, well, maybe not for this talk, but you want light and sound energy emanating from the room and from me to then enter your eyes and ears, and so you can understand this talk and enjoy this day. You want this to be a causal relationship. If it wasn't, well, you couldn't comprehend almost anything. There'd be chaos. Things can change. People think, well, determinism's true. There's that one future, nothing changes. That's not true. You can change your clothes. I just changed the slide. So you can change your opinion. Things do change. Just because things are determined or caused doesn't mean there is no change going on. Avoidance can still occur. This is one of those picky ones that a lot of people are like, well, wait a minute. I'm going to say you can avoid stepping on sharp objects. You can avoid getting speeding tickets. You can avoid things. And then some of you might say, well, wait a minute. You said one physically possible future. That's not real avoidance. You're not avoiding the actual future. Well, of course, true. You can only avoid the anticipated future. What would it mean to avoid the actual future? You can't do that. The future is going to be what it is. Actually, the future becomes the present, and you can't do that. So you can only avoid anticipatory things. But you can still have a cause and effect relationship related to that avoidance. You see a sharp object, you want your being and your eyes to cause you to then move so you don't step on it. Indeterminacy, and this is usually linked to, well, the opposite of determinacy. So maybe there's some randomness, maybe there's some room to maneuver here. And usually people bring in quantum theory because it is true that the findings of quantum theory imply that we may be in an indeterministic universe. It's not agreed upon, there's no consensus. Also, perhaps quantum theory effects don't scale up due to many complicated reasons, but for the most part, it's maybe not the case that determinism is true. Again, I'm not arguing determinism is, but I do want to say that even if things are indeterminate, you still don't get independence from space and time. things are still being caused. It's now just in a pseudo-random manner. And I'm not sure how randomness helps people. Sometimes people think, well, if determinism is not true and randomness is, then there's more room to maneuver in my choices. Well, rolling dice, does that help make a choice? Sometimes it does, actually. You're like, I'm not sure what to do, 50-50, flip a coin, it helps you. But it doesn't really offer you that much more freedom from causality. And interestingly, some people think indeterminacy is better, but in some cases, it might actually be less desirable. If you're going through a lightning storm in a field, crossing it, do you want the pattern to be random, or do you want it to be predictable? Well, I'd want to go for the predictable one myself. So, in summation, free will, the term, is familiar, but it's problematically ambiguous. Countercausal choice, on the other hand, I think should replace it. It'll make discussions more efficient, more effective. It's clearer. And like, well, it's not entirely clear. I don't know what countercausal is. Right. So that one moment, that one word, something, I'm not sure what that means, that forces the discussion that, as I said, has to take place anyway, or it should, for an efficient discussion. And I've tried to say that determinism is not as bad as you think. Obviously, I've tried to condense a lot in a short amount of time, but these are some thoughts at least you can take with you, hopefully, and you can think about, and we can talk about in discussion if there's time. And this is just a final thought that I thought was a little bit interesting. You can let me know. We've heard knowledge is power, and I certainly agree with this. The more educated you are, the more aware you are, in general, helps you you're more likely to achieve your goals. Helps you better achieve what you want to achieve. And that is the power involved in that. But we also know that ignorance is bliss, or at least people say it. And so for certain things, of course, ignorance is bliss. Not true ignorance. You'd fall down and hurt yourself because you don't understand anything. But generally speaking, there's certain things you may not want to know. But interestingly, the microscopic, macroscopic events, the billions, millions, trillions that have gone into the history of the entire universe, and you are unaware of that. You cannot comprehend that. Your human brain does not. And that is what gives you the illusion of making choices counter to the causal fabric of the universe. So in some sense, ignorance is freedom. Thank you.